Is there anything else we should do to warm up?
In fact, this is our poster.
Yes.
And he's the genius behind it.
This is it. I have to agree now. So, as always, Astrid and me, we want to welcome you to the Café con Paulo Freire podcast, hosted here at the Center for Environment and Development Studies at Uppsala University, here in Uppsala, Sweden. And we've been doing this now for 4 years, almost. Different formats, different types of programs, different guests. And now, as from last year, I think, we are doing this as a podcast as well. So we do it live on Zoom, but it's also recorded as a listening podcast, but also as a video on YouTube as well. If you want to see us and see how we look in this ever-changing studio. And I should also say something about myself. So I'm Daniel Mossberg, and I work with education and outreach here at CEMUS in different roles and capacities. And the kind of key feature about CEMUS is our student-led education, with students organizing, planning, working with our different courses in collaboration with others in learning and teaching around that. Yes, I think that's enough from me. Do you also want to say something about yourself as well?
Short, because Colin knows me well.
Yep.
You know me well. Basically, today I met with Gosha. She's the head of the pool of supervisors for the master students, and I am supervising the Chinese students. So we had, some business to talk about. And basically, I'm surprised to soon be 84. Difficult to understand that time went so fast. And engaged, engaged academician, do some teaching, writing, publishing, some poetry, and it's a pleasure, and thank you, Colin, to be with us. Our relation is through, now we'll make publicity. This is us, Action Learning and Action Research Journal. This is a special issue that came out last October, if I'm not mistaken, to honor the contribution of Erik Lindfot, who maybe is well known outside of Sweden, done in Sweden. And basically, it's a very good issue. And let me suggest people doing action research can publish with us. It's a bloody peer good magazine journal. So that's our connection.
That's really good. And then I guess it's over to you, Colin, to give some kind of introduction and context about yourself, your background, but also what is your connection then to action learning, action research, and then the work that you do today as well.
Right, thank you. And wonderful promotion there, Ezra. Thank you very much. My background is I am a self-employed. I run my own business in organisational change, and I have been doing that for 25 years. Before that, in various roles in human resources and other types of work, including contract management in buildings. So quite a varied background in that respect. I got introduced to action research, action learning when I did an all change course in the 90s, and joined ALARA and sort of sat there in the background like most members do, and then got asked. In fact, I think I volunteered to help them write their strategic plan about 16, 17 years ago, and that led to me being volunteered into the presidency. Not sure how I made that jump, but that's the way it happened. I've been leading ALARA for about 15 years, and ALARA itself is an organisation based in Australia, but members around the world. Been running conferences, world congresses, publishing the journal now for 30 years. The organisation started about 35 years ago. We believe we're the only one that actually encompasses action learning and action research openly. Many of the action research associations do like to bring in action learning, but we've obviously been running it that way since the inception. The sort of things we do are literally the publications, the journal. We publish monographs, which are longer papers in a single publication. We've published a practitioner's paper, and we've got another one being written at the moment. We run conferences, as I said, and world congresses. We're actually planning a multi-country world congress later this year, September. People based in New Zealand, Australia, and Philippines, and possibly another country if we can convince that association to join us. In that case, we're trying to demonstrate collaboration on a global basis, something the world desperately needs, but trying to show how we can collaborate with other organisations to run a multiple day, multiple site World Congress.
Yeah, and we should also thank you for staying up late. We should say that with the time difference to Australia.
That's fine. I'm not too bad at this hour. In an hour or two, I'll start to slur.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, Sven, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, great, Colin. So, two things that I wanted to bring to trigger the conversation. One is how do you view the relation between action learning and active learning? And here is publicity for a book published by Emerald exactly on active learning strategies in higher education. We could begin there. Mm-hmm. So how do you see that nexus, this connection between active and action learning?
It depends on how you would define active learning. I have only looked a little bit online for its definition. And I saw that as being a method that engages students rather than being passive. They're active, obviously. Whereas action learning has a methodology, or a cyclical methodology, that is active, but it's about that, planning what you're going to do, acting on acting on your plan, and sitting back and reflecting on it. And I don't know whether active learning has that component of cyclical reflection and planning and action. Tell me what your view of active learning.
That's a good first line. Then I want to push a little bit further. I had, when I studied my master's, well-known rural sociologist, was president of Rural Society. And he was using the term action research in a systemic way. But I remember in class he saying, like a scientific fact, humans are basically selfish. So the consequence is, if you are collaborative, if you're altruist, something is wrong with you. You're sick. And people took that line, like being the expert coming from this big sociologist. So I thought, how to discuss action that could be a reaction, could be action to maintain so everything remains the same, or proactive action in terms of bringing some innovative for the common good, so to speak. Am I clear?
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe I can add a thing as well that might be interesting for all of us here in the room, is that Uppsala University ran an active student participation project. Was it over 10 years ago, or it started maybe even 15 years ago? And then the discussion was very much of what could then be said to include that. Isn't every type of teaching and learning, isn't it an active process in some sense? And then the discussion kind of drifted and the project moved towards also, so any form that differs from traditional just lecturing one-way communication is an active form of student participation, but then it becomes kind of watered down and it doesn't maybe change that much around education. And from a CEMUS context, with having students 2 and 2 employed per course, working very much with interactive seminars and workshops and really trying to engage the students in the learning process, and also with guest lecturers being invited, that they are also encouraged to be more interactive, even if it's a lecturing style of education. So that was also interesting in what then differs one form from another, and how do you avoid getting bogged down into that everything becomes the same in a sense. But should we also maybe ask more questions, because I'm curious also of the connection between action research and then action learning, and the differences between the two, because we also used an action research kind of method in one of our courses for the final examination a couple of years back. But maybe if you can try to define that for us, or a starting point.
Yeah, there's a number of people who would argue action learning is a form of action research. I personally prefer to see them as separate. Action research, by the mere fact it's research, produces outcomes that, or some of its outcome is knowledge that is spread wider than the individuals involved in the research. And whether that's an action research project done within an organisation and it's knowledge for the rest of the employees of that organisation, or whether it's published in something like our journal or any of the other professional journals, where it becomes knowledge, or it becomes a video or on YouTube or anything like that, that creates knowledge wider than the people involved. It's action learning does not necessarily do that, and it's more about it's often about individual development or organisational development, and it's solving the problem that exists via a collaborative approach, just like action research is solving or dealing with a matter that the organisation, the community wants to change. Sorry, go on, Ezra.
No, go ahead. You're the
I feel free to interrupt. My argument, obviously, coming from change management, is that you're using action learning, action research to make a change to something. There is an issue that needs to be dealt with. If you go back to Reg Revan's original view of action learning issues, they had to be complex. They did not need to be ones that you already had a method to solve it. That the reason you were bringing a group together to discuss and reflect was literally that it was a new problem. There needed to be new ways of solving it. The principle of action learning, action research is you're going to be dealing with an issue that the group or the organisation, the community, the nation does not have a way to solve it. They want to find a new way. And those new ways could come from the ideas of individuals, but it's just not been, I guess, tried.
You're bringing in, thank you, Colin, the issue like scaling, nation, small, and then it's linked to the notion, the term innovation. You do action research to produce innovations that then will supposedly, assumedly bring positive changes. So where I wanted to intervene is, I think it's great to problematize these given terms. Action, I already mentioned that it could be an action that is regressive or reactionary. We have today like Trumpism all over the world. I don't know if Australia, but even in Sweden. You have the kind of action from the Gattopardo, which is you change things so they remain basically the same. And then other kind of action that may be more geared towards the common good. Then the contribution from Latin America, thinking of Paulo Freire, Orlando Falsborda, and heirs to that tradition and part of that tradition, they say that it's artificial to separate teaching, learning from research, that they feed into each other. That doing research is a way to teach, learn, and vice versa. So how do you comment on that? You said you prefer to separate the terms. So coming from a different tradition.
Yeah, when I say I'm separate, it's more the fact that I see them with different perspectives, different in perhaps intent, but at the end of the day, they are two similar methodologies. And when it boils down to it, our definition of action learning, action research is all encompassing. There are multiple ways that people undertake action learning, action research that we embrace as part of that family of methodologies. Coming back to your comment about it's research and teaching is directly linked. I'd use the examples that, and you come back to your active learning in certain regions within secondary education in Australia. I know it's happened in Singapore. The departments have chosen to use action research as the preferred method to help educate both the teachers and the students. And the methodology they've taken is obviously to encourage the teachers to develop their skills with action research and then apply that methodology when they're teaching the students, and having the students identify a problem that needs addressing and doing an action research project that helps them learn about that particular problem, the possible solutions, to test out a few ideas, and obviously to learn how to do that sort of approach on other issues that they may face subsequently. That sort of methodology of teaching while researching, I think, is very appropriate, and it's where we'd love to have people embrace those ideas beyond their schooling.
There was a shift in the 60s, 70s. The term research and development was used, and basically was limited to the industry, to, you could say, organizational. And then there was a response from, let's say, the critical side of social sciences, like Emory, that they were disenfranchised, disenchanted Marxists, said, well, we cannot change society. Let's try to change institutions. And then they launched, from their perspective, action research. And then came a new wave saying, well, action research still seems to be vertical. We would like to make it more participatory, that all the parts become co-researchers. So what would be your comment on this? Not only linguistic development, but also processual reality development.
I don't know that history. I am so used to the concept that action learning, action research are participatory processes. There are varying degrees of what you mean by participation that I see when people, for example, people write for our papers for our journal. The mere fact that you can have first person, second person, third person level of that for starters, but also the question of, is participation, I get you involved and get your opinion and then I go away and make a decision, or is participation, we all toss around the ideas and we agree on what is the answer to that we want to use?
Can I comment on that?
Yeah.
Participation became also a mantra. Participatory socialism, participatory democracy was, part of the movement and so on and so forth. And then Daniel Katz at the University of Michigan, he said, people participated with Mussolini and they participate with Trump. They are fascist participation. Is that what we mean? Or, like Freire would suggest, it has to be critical, reason, reflexive participation?
Yeah. Look, I would argue yes, but I do recognise there is a plethora. I'm trying to think of the right word. Rainbows coming to my mind. There's just a very broad range of ways people interpret the concept of participation.
Yeah. Should we dive over to another thread? Because I'm also curious of how you work with different organizations with all of this that we've been talking about. And could you maybe take us through step by step from somebody reaching out to you about an issue or a challenge and how the actual practical work around all of this pans out?
Recognizing ALARA's not a consultancy itself. It doesn't undertake action learning, action research work itself. It simply promotes it and encourages networking amongst practitioners. I would use the example where I got the representatives of the editorial teams of action learning, action research journals together to discuss how we might work together to promote action learning, action research, and therefore encourage people to submit papers for our respective journals. That approach meant that I started emailing people and saying, would you like to meet and have discussions? And then encouraging them to identify other people who might be useful participants in our group. That took probably 2 to 3 years of plugging away to get a reasonable group. By the end of it, I had 11 journals representatives involved. Not all of them would meet at one time, but at least they were still involved in the email communication. That led to us running 2 sets of 2 webinars for people interested in submitting papers for journals. And the aim of those sessions was not that they'd come along and hear what they had to do, but they'd come along with a draft of their abstract so that they could discuss that draft with someone who represented the editorial team of at least one of the publications. And we got about 8 of those publications along each time to the webinars. And our first sessions, I think we had 26 and 12 or something because again, worldwide, we had to have 2 different times for the sessions. A good crowd. The second time we ran it, we had a much smaller crowd, but both of those sessions saw the potential authors finding it fantastic that they could actually talk to somebody who was effectively an editor or somebody who knew the process for editing, to be able to get feedback on what they were proposing to do and how they might go about submitting for the journals. Now that process was, I saw an example of trying to get the collaboration going. There were more things we wanted to explore, and then COVID hit.
Can I come in with the comment that Eric addressed in his doctoral thesis at the Royal Polytechnic, is equivalent to the one in Zurich or in Tel Aviv. Basically, the clash, the confrontation between conventional science, pretending that they own validity, reliability as criteria for being scientific. And Eric, in his thesis, he showed that action research could be more valid and more reliable than the conventional. So there are paradigms, but it has to do with the difficulty of researchers, young researchers, doctoral researchers, who are to publish, because to publish in an action research journal is not so much high status as to publish in a conventional, real scientific journals. Would you like to comment on that?
Sadly, very true. There are a couple of the journals that are now listed with Scopus, which helps. And one of the aims I had for that group was to make sure our journal and other journals reach that level of recognition. For example, we found that in South Africa, and I believe it's true in many other countries, the lecturers, the professors, had to get their papers in specific journals to receive a bonus. And if they put it in a journal like ours, which was not at that time listed in the particular list, the required list, they got nothing for it other than it was published. And that sort of distortion wasn't helping promote the journals and gain the publications, the submissions for publication. So yes, I totally agree with you that there is that perception that you have to publish in only a very select band of journals to be recognised as having valid research. And unfortunately, it's leading to the situation where there is a smaller and smaller group of publications that are accepted, and there are other publications that are falling by the wayside that, because they can't get the submissions, because they can't get the funding, they can't get the recognition.
Thank you. I mean, I'm going to jump to this question of action and active strategies of higher learning. When we have now Christina Marulli in the board and John Anderson, and they have been part of our program here, our podcast Coffees with Paulo Freire. And my line was, what are we talking about? Freire talk about active learning. You have all kinds of theories. So isn't active learning a truism? if it is not active, then it is indoctrination. And I want to bring that point because today, I think, even in colleges, like Hillsdale College in the United States, they are doing higher education to indoctrinate people that then vote for Trumpists. It is a conservative approach using the term, action learning. They even use the language that participatory people were using in the 60s and 70s. So I would like you to take, to reflect and then share with us your views on how today action research and learning could help us to mitigate the damage of the kind of populistic learning, which is mass hysteria, going back to 100 years ago to neo-fascism. Would you like to make a comment from your experience, your perspective?
Really, my tough question. The reaction I have is that popularism will dominate until people start to see that it doesn't produce the results they have been told it will produce. That you won't be able to fight that tide, but that it doesn't mean you should stop doing what you're doing in the background and building a case, building the support, etc., for the way that the world should operate, that is, in a collaborative fashion. I guess I come back to this concept that we're doing for this World Congress. We want to, unlike a normal conference where you go along and you hear people talk to you and tell you all of the latest bits so that you learn from their experience, we want to take the next step and say, what have we learnt in this World Congress? What should we as participants now do into the future? What is the issues that we believe we should work on together into the future beyond this Congress?
Fantastic. That question I brought in Melbourne last year when we could not meet. Unfortunately, my comment was, here we have these fantastic research findings, brilliant designs, and nothing about what to do about this problematic situation. You have gathered thousands of, sociologists or whatever, so it's not enough so I think this approach that you are taking, it's let's do something about it. I think that's a concern in CEMUS as well, for you.
Yeah, and it's a concern with universities in general, but it's also, if you look at how much the Swedish government funds higher education and research in Sweden, it's a substantial, I think, a number 3 or something in the state budget for the whole of Sweden. So there is a lot of resources and taxes basically going to this. So then the question is, what is this? What is the service of the university to Sweden, but also to the world? In the world that we live in now, it seems even more urgent in a sense. And there was a lot of but recent Swedish initiatives of having higher education being free to everybody in the world. So as long as you could fund your own kind of living costs, the education was free for everybody in the world. In Sweden, it's not anymore. It's only EU and EES, I think. But so it's those kind of basic functions as well. But I think it's also tempting as a researcher or as a student as well to kind of, as the world becomes stranger and crazier, you kind of you want to distance yourself, like we talked about before as well in previous episode. You kind of build your own bubbles within bubbles, and try to keep yourself away from all this craziness that goes on out there. And also just wanting to live a fun, healthy, happy life without taking on all the world's problems.
Well, keep saying.
Yeah, and keep saying, which I think is important.
I'd agree with you. The one thing I don't see is the desire to create a bubble that separates you from everything, but rather that it's a safe environment for you to work in. You need to be in contact with what's happening in the world and proving that there are better ways of doing things that will help people see eventually that the way they've been told is wrong, and actually there's a better alternative. And things like here in Australia, we're faced with the problem that universities are losing their funding from America because not because the research is a problem, but because the university does not advocate only two genders. And it's all, what relevance is the gender got to do with research into a disease? But that's the way the world is at the moment. So those researchers have to find a way to somehow continue their work to be able to produce the outcome that they're striving for, to show the world you don't need to have to worry about whether our body approves two genders or all genders to actually have a solution to this particular problem. And I'd argue the same goes with what we do with action learning and action research. It's about finding ways to solve the problems that face the world, and whether that means that we're sitting there with this wonderful idea and only a small number of people understand and follow it. That continues to be the issue we always have. Action learning, action research tends to be a fairly quiet.
I mentioned the book on transformative research and higher education. Christina is there, and John Anderson that are in the board. Basically, here we're saying, the kind of research and higher education that enhances critical reasoning, that produces useful knowledge to transform situations for the common good, not for the particular good of mass becoming a trillionaire. Okay, that's not. And one of the chapters by Vicente Manzano Arrondo, he was acknowledged as the best psychology teacher in Spain, and he's going to quit working at the university, great loss. And the name of the chapter is The Absurd University. Absurd, it's a provocative term. Now, but there is hope in his chapter saying, okay, if this neoliberalized, privatized in the mind, reductionistic, it's not a whole story. So let's explore alternatives. And the alternatives entail doing core research, not doing research on. It's doing research with the people, the situations, and so on.
Do you feel like you want to comment that? Should we move on to the next one?
Please do.
Yeah, and a short comment for me as well. It's like, if you have worked long enough within an organization or worked long enough within this university, finding alternatives and starting to formulate them might be good and necessary. But it's always when you move out of something, the funding doesn't really come with you. So that is kind of like the tricky part of, if you have the funds and you have the means for it, please go ahead. But if you don't, it's a much trickier situation. And then if all of us with strange or curious or critical ideas leave the university, then there's not really much left of it.
But there are examples that to be mentioned. We had a program about Gustavo Esteva and Ivan Illich. Gustavo died last year, a couple of years ago. and he created the University of Life, and it is still alive. Of course, it's not prestigious as Harvard is. It won't get funding from Trump, but it's managing to produce interested students and volunteer. I don't know how it works exactly. There are historical examples too, that the first Peace Research Institute, PRIO, in Oslo, it was presented to be an alternative where everyone from the top researcher, senior, to the house, to the door, to the cleaner, they earned the same. This changed in time as the seniors wanted more credit and more payment. But as you said, Colin, whatever is happening now with this kind of populism frenzy, destructive, if you think about the environment, about the military-industrial complex, about wars, about world disorders, about insecurity councils and so on, is the question, of course, of how to keep hope when time is so short. And this populism seems to lead to a precipice of non-return. So what would be your line and your line?
You want to start, Colin? Yeah.
No, I'd agree. The hope is the big issue you've highlighted already, Daniel, with the comment about if the funding doesn't follow you, it's difficult to continue the work. And I guess that's what the America's doing at the moment, is it's pulling its funding where it doesn't want things to happen. And it's a case of whether other funders step up to fill the void. The question of hope really comes down to whether the people leading the action learning, action research, or any other research are able to find little wins along the way that shows that, yes, we are on a tough journey, but we're actually progressing. We're making a difference, if you like.
Yeah, and I think here at CEMUS we've talked about active hope as a concept. So Joanna Macy has talked about it, or written a whole book on that, and others have talked about it. So I think it's more, because for me it's always been like fairly hopeless, but that's not a reason to stop working or keep busy on all of these issues. But I know it's different for different people as well. So I think, and it's also a difference between being hopeful, hopelessness, and giving up. It doesn't necessarily that the other side of the whole thing is giving up, because even if it's completely hopeless in all sorts of ways, giving up or not giving up is still, or at least for some, a choice. We should start wrapping up. And I'm also, when we talked about all of these different concepts, or these basic two, action learning, action research concepts, what are like good starting points in all of this? We sometimes talk about that. And also, where can we find, I mean, the ALARA webpage maybe has some resources and reading, but is there other resources you want to point to, or people, institutions, universities, people out there?
The obvious thing, yes, ALARA has a website, it has a whole stack of information. The journals, the monographs are available through there. The other thing that's we've found extremely good is Bob Dick is a gent from Queensland in Australia who's ran a twice a year emailed course, in inverted brackets, teaching people the basics of action research, called AREOL, AREOL.
Could you send the web, please? Could you send it?
Yes, I can. But it is actually mentioned on the website as well. We've got a couple of members who are helping Bob and myself translate his work, because Bob's older than you, Ezra. He translated his work into a MOOC, a massive online course, open online course. Our hope is that sometime early next year we will have that available so that people will be able to get the basics of action research and encourage them. The reason I raise that is I've met people who have got their PhD who've referred to the fact that they did Bob's course as their very first step into action research and went on eventually to go and do their doctorates. It was a really good resource. We have a copy of it attached to our website, but the MOOC will be obviously a step beyond that to be able to continue Bob's work. Beyond ALARA, there is obviously several other organisations that promote action learning or action research. There's CARN in Europe and elsewhere. There's ARNA, ARNA in the Americas. There's a Malaysian Action Research Network. Again, on the ALARA's website, there's a section called Networks, and we have a list of about 80 or 90 different sites and for organisations, publications that are involved in action learning, action research. So there's a lot there that people can perhaps find something that's local to them, although most of the networks operate online, so it's as local as your computer.
We have Spark in Sweden. They just
Spark in Sweden.
Yeah, Spark in Sweden. I met Arya, who knows you, in Melbourne. She had a volume on action research. Arya. So maybe we could.
There's a very large. If you went to those pages, you'd see there's quite a large community of and lots of organisations spread around.
Yeah, and I'm guessing also in this bookshelf, and I'm pointing to a way you can't see, but on my right here, there is the pedagogical kind of literature at CEMUS as well. So I think there's a couple of titles here as well. So
you'll get some more from me.
Yeah.
I'm getting rid of my library.
Yeah, we're slowly assimilating that. So that's great. And I'm also the World Congress that you mentioned as well. When is that, and where will it be?
It is in. I've got to remember it now.
September.
It's September. It'll be in Auckland in New Zealand on the I think it's the 18th and 19th. It'll be in Sydney on the 23rd and 24th, and we'll be in Manila on the 30th of September, the 1st of October, and of course be online as well. So you can. The only headache, of course, with Europe is most of the sessions will be on during the middle of the night, so it'll be your turn to get up late.
Yeah, but it's also, if you ask people, can they stay up for an Olympics or a similar ice hockey game? They manage to do that. So, and some people in Sweden, they take the day after off. So I think, if you can stay up for sports, maybe you can stay up for action research as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And when it boils down to there's going to be sessions people will find particularly interesting, and they just need to stay for that particular session.
Yeah.
The online registration will be relatively cheap.
Very short. I was thinking in terms of optimism, pessimism. Gramsci and others saying optimism of the heart, pessimism of the mind. And then I was thinking of Greta Thunberg, because in her youthful expression, she said, actually, it's therapeutic to go into action. It seems to overpass all the shadows, that action itself, invites hope to continue.
Yeah, That's very true.
Yeah.
Okay,
And-
but we
and
have a.
if
Go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to comment on that. The concept of using a structured way of doing that action and reflection gives you the opportunity to be able to see when something doesn't happen as you expect, that there is lessons to be learnt and you've got a better way of doing it, rather than getting depressed by the fact that that didn't work.
Yes.
So very much action learning, action research can be very positive.
Yeah, that's a great ending. So thank you so much, Colin, for being with us today, also staying up late. If it's late for you, I suppose some people work beyond midnight, but yeah.
Great to see you, Colin.
Yeah, great to have you with you, and thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for having me. And I hope I'll see you in September.